Hello and welcome to America in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Executive Editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is Casey Harper, the Center Square's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief. How are things, Casey?
Things are good, Dan. How about you?
Things are crazy stuff going on in Washington, D.C. as usual, Casey. Not a lack of things for you to report on. We are recording this on Friday, August 11th. More updates, Casey, into the congressional investigation into the Biden family and money they received from foreign oligarchs, I guess, international groups that have sent more than $20 million apparently to the Biden family. U.S. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, who's been essentially pushing the investigation into the Biden family, released more financial documents this week. Tell us about it.
You know, Dan, it's just $20 million, nothing to see here. Just $20 million from oligarchs and Eastern European countries going to the son of the vice president when the vice president's on phone calls with them. Totally normal behavior. I'm just being a little tongue in cheek, obviously, but there are now bank records being released, as you referenced, this week from James Comer, House Oversight Chairman. And these bank records just show actual evidence for these payments that were made from, entities in Russia, Kazakhstan, or Kazakhstan rather. We already know, we've heard about the Ukrainian payments. So this is the first I've heard of Kazakhstan payments. And I think a lot of, maybe there was some hinting of this before, but before this, it was Romania, Ukraine, and China. Now it's Romania, Ukraine, China, Russia, and Kazakhstan. Okay. Not exactly, the heartbeat of NATO for sure. And so there's, right. And also the new update is, it used to be, so a few weeks ago I reported the number that was that Hunter Biden received over $10 million, right? And then when the whistleblowers testified, and we wrote about that at the centersquare.com at length, the new number was over 17 million, right? So it's like, wow, this is a big development, over 17 million. And now with this latest revelation, we're up over 20 million. So I just want to point out the number of countries is steadily climbing, and the amount of money is steadily climbing, right? So those are the things that may, if you're not following this closely, you may not have noticed. And the way that Comer, the oversight chairman, says this worked is there's about 20 shell companies that are split among the Biden family and their business associates. People like Devin Archer, who testified, to this committee about how then Vice President Biden would jump on the phone and talk to these business associates, and was directly involved in that sense, in the sense that his voice was lent credibility to Hunter Biden as he executed many of these deals. Whether there was more involvement is still, kind of unclear. But
let me ask you a question. So we're a capitalist country, right?
Sure.
What's wrong with the president and his son making a few bucks off of foreign interests? Why does this matter?
Yeah, well, okay. Good question. In a capitalist society, if you want to make money, you sell what? You sell a good or a service to those who want it, right? Fair enough. That's like the only way to make money in a capitalist society. Okay. So what was the good or service that Hunter Biden was selling? That's the question. And as far as we can tell, almost none of Hunter Biden in this business venture they had was selling nothing but access. Right.
Access
so what was being for sale? Who was
vice president under Barack Obama at the time, right?
Right. And so now part of it, I would say, is kind of the illusion of access. And now, to be fair, that is not totally foreign to DC. In fact, that is largely how DC operates. You hire a lobbyist because a lobbyist tells you they can get meetings with these lawmakers and get your issues in front of them. And sometimes they're lying. Sometimes they're, the lobbyists, sometimes they're overstating how much influence they have. So it's totally possible and within their own possibility that Hunter Biden, obviously had his own, a lot of personal issues, would overstate the amount of influence that he had over his own father. But it's one thing to lobby for American companies to Congress. It's another thing to directly lobby for adversarial companies or adversarial countries like China and Russia, countries that would be happy to probably take us down a notch and are actively working to do it. China, countries that we could be within the year at war with, You know, I mean, if China invades Taiwan, we could very easily be at war with China immediately. We're almost at war with Russia already. So this isn't like your average somebody at the golf course trying to get an oil company an extra contract. This is working with foreign adversarial countries and oligarchs in those countries. And the other thing that's different about it is it's not unusual for someone with a famous last name to try to leverage that into making some money when they're not really the famous one, right? They just have the last name. But now we have direct evidence that it wasn't just Hunter Biden running around saying, hey, I'm a Biden. We know that the then Vice President, Joe Biden, was jumping on the phone and talking on these speaker calls to large groups. So he did have at least some level of involvement. And now I think the big question that we're trying to get to the bottom is how much of that money actually went to President Joe Biden personally. And that is going to be the big question because, you know, your troubled son doing all these things is one thing. But if President Biden actually took, you know, $1 million from some adversarial country, or even not adversarial, how is it that we're spending all this money in Ukraine now? And now we find out that the president has had, and at least the president's son and possibly the president himself has all kinds of dealings in Ukraine that could be exposed if things went wrong. I mean, there was a big concern when Trump was president, remember, that somebody had blackmail on Trump. Do you remember? I'm sure you remember that. There was people always worried that people had blackmail on Trump and could extort him and use this blackmail to get him to do things. But if President Biden really has all these dealings in Ukraine, and now we're sending billions and billions of taxpayer dollars to Ukraine, I think it's worth asking the question if the president has some vested personal interest in making sure things turn out well in Ukraine. And I don't think it would be, I don't think that these Ukrainian oligarchs or the president or whoever whose, you know, very existence is threatened would be too shy or too moral to not use that against the president if they had that information.
All interesting stuff, Casey, something that we, of course, at the Center Square will keep on top of. It seems like Comer's committee releases new details, new documents just about every week. We, of course, will stay on that at thecentersquare.com, but we are out of time. For Casey Harper, I am Dan McCaleb. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe.